Make a choice to begin anywhere in your life, and the next chapter of your journey has begun. And along the way, be open to being inspired. Listen to the conversations led by Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick, Howard University Interim President, President Emeritus, and Charles R. Drew, Professor of Surgery, on The Journey.
Welcome to The Journey. I'm Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick, Interim President and President Emeritus of Howard University. We are living in a moment where trust in media is fragile, information is abundant, and communities, particularly Black and Brown communities, are often portrayed through narratives of crisis rather than possibility. In this political and social climate, media literacy is essential. At HBCUs like Howard, we have a responsibility to train journalists who can critically evaluate information, avoid harmful framing, and report solutions with integrity and accountability. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Kimberly R. Moffitt, Dean of the Cathy Hughes School of Communications, and Dr. Ingrid Sturgis. Together, we'll explore the role of HBCUs in shaping ethical media, solutions, journalism, and public trust. Let's begin. So let me first start with you, Dr. Sturgis. We go a long way back, and I'm going to use that as my reference point. I had to take an intro to speech class when I was an undergrad here at Howard. Not that you taught me that class, but I harken back to that class. And one of the things I always remember about that class, even in my day-to-day, was the importance that the School of Communications emphasized on cultural literacy, on making sure that your message was for the right audience, et cetera. Today, a lot of that seems to be out of the window in the general media, I would say, industry today. But still at Howard, it seems to be an emphasis. Why?
Well, I don't know that it's all the way out of the window. I think it's somewhat out of the window because a lot of what we say is now mediated by AI or social media. And so our audience is far broader than it used to be. It used to be the person sitting in front of you or the person on the television. Now it might be whoever is linked to you through social media or who is on TikTok, if you place it on there, or on some other platforms. So your message goes wider, and so sometimes with that the case, what happens is that your message gets distorted because it's going to the wrong audience.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I guess, Dr. Moffitt, as you have come in as the new dean here at the School of Communications, I'm curious as to what you see, given all the opportunities that young people today have to deliver their message, as well as to have people, ingest it. What do you see as probably some of the guiding principles that you want to see our students leave here with?
Integrity. That's probably first and foremost, is we come from a history of having others craft our narratives and telling the story through a lens that oftentimes puts us at a deficit or looks at us as less than and not full human people who have interesting and exciting stories to tell. And I think being able to do that type of work here at Howard ensures that they are doing so with their full integrity at the center, while also with their full humanness and humanity at the center, so that those stories can't simply be erased by others, but in fact get reinforced because of the way that they tell them, the complexity in which they tell them, and the nuances that they offer to share just how vast our experiences are as a people.
One of the things that I guess concerns me a bit is as we get into this new era, it has been shaped by our political climate. There's no denying this, and this is not a political statement, but the president has very, very clear, unique ways of messaging.
Yes.
And of communicating. He has turned what I think we would see through a certain lens with our own eyes as a narrative about an incident like January 6th. and has now, curated a narrative around that is in our museums and other places that suggest it was something different.
Yes.
When you look at that and you talk about integrity, is it the reporter's truth, or is it the audience truth, or is it the actual facts? I mean, where are we drawing the lines as this new framing has occurred?
I don't think we're drawing lines at all yet. And it seems a bit of a free-for-all for how we're telling stories and which stories receive the sensational headlines and the attention, especially in an age in which the news media is so accessible to us in many forms. And now everyone thinks that they are a journalist. So all it takes is to have that iPhone and a few minutes, and you are telling stories that may not be in alignment with any sense of facts, but are simply just the way in which you want to craft and tell a story. And I think it's also important to understand that there are some of us who are more savvy about communication than others. There are some of us who clearly know how to tap into segments of society and achieve the goals that they want in terms of ways of telling stories. And we are in an age now where it takes a few ways of shifting the camera or giving angles to tell a story that then make you believe something completely different happened than it actually did. And where I think, again, a place like Howard plays such a significant role is pushing back against that and saying we still have standards, we still have expectations. And I'm not even getting into the conversation about objectivity, because I've never believed in that part of media. What I've believed in is that integrity sits at the core, and it needs to be that we believe in human beings actually receiving messages and making determinations for themselves, but not the news media crafting that narrative for them.
So I guess with that in mind, Dr. Sturgis, speaking of news angles, we had a recent incident in which, unfortunately, a woman in Minnesota, while protesting against ICE, lost her life. Several different shots,
Yes.
as happens with so many things today. And when I say several different shots, I mean several different camera shots, video shots. But the interpretation starkly divided along political lines, regardless of what people are seeing. And I just wonder, as you talk to students today, what's the responsibility of students to tell a story that avoids creating harm to a certain community by obviously depicting the facts as they are, and how much of it does require the journalist to interpret said facts sometimes for an audience?
Well, we all interpret. We all come with our own point of view, our own lived experiences, and our own way in which we see the world. What we tell students is to get a 360 perspective of what's happening. So you have to talk to everybody. You talk to the person that was impacted. You talk to one of the eyewitnesses. You talk to the person who might have initiated the violence. So you talk to everybody so that you can craft a story that's honest and as factual as possible. But that's really more difficult in this world because so much of it ends up on social media and so much of it is interpreted by the news organization that's got a hold of the story and wants to impart some kind of point of view that may be political. It may be the point of view of the station. It may be the point of view of the journalist. So it's really difficult. We're living in a really difficult period when it comes to how you can view news and information. We all have to be vigilant because so much of it gets distorted and we're not in control of it and we don't even know where the source of it comes from half the time. So we really have to be careful in the way that we're distributing information as journalists, and we talk to students about having their own platforms, and we talk to them about publishing their stories on HU News Service, which is going to carry a different kind of responsibility. We also have students who work for the Hilltop. That carries with it its own responsibility. So we talk to them about being honest about what they see and how they tell the story, and also the care in which they tell the story, because sometimes the person that they interview could be harmed simply by doing the interview. And so we have to be aware that some people even as a journalist, you have power over because they may not understand the environment in which they're communicating with you.
I'm curious about something. What is your perspective of solutions journalism, and how does that play a role in today's media literacy? And is it a real thing?
Oh, it's absolutely a real thing. As a matter of fact, a number of us have had training in solutions journalism because it offers another way of telling the story, because sometimes we get so much news that we feel depressed, powerless, hopeless. And so what solutions journalism does in the way that you tell the story, you craft the story, you give a little bit more power back to the person that's reading the article. So say if you have a situation where you're talking about homelessness, right? And so the journalist goes out to see if there's anybody who's provided a small solution. Of course, we're not going to be able to solve the problem, but maybe they provided a place where homeless people can go, or somebody provided a place for homeless people to go and get shelter. So that's a story that you can write about one person who had an impact on what seemed like an impossible situation. And that's what I like about solutions journalism, is because you're not always hearing, I can't do it, I don't know, what are we going to do, how can we help? And this is a story that, and it uses data, so it's not a feel-good story. It's based on real facts and data and how somebody can solve a problem.
So Dean Moffat, I'll give you a practical solution that or I should say a practical scenario in which I've been involved around this solutions journalism. So I would say about twice a month, someone contacts me. Sometimes it's someone I know directly, sometimes it's someone who's just heard my own story. And the story they usually want to discuss with me is that a journalist has now produced a story that says cure for sickle cell found in New York. And I always know that it's not inaccurate, because it's probably the first person in a particular state who's had gene therapy, for example, but it's not the first person to be cured.
Right.
And I'm just curious as to, since we talk a lot about harm, and probably I would also say unintended consequences, how do we then get students, while even producing solutions journalism, not to probably overstate the benefits or the solution, or to make sure that they're keeping it in context of what there is?
Yeah, I would say broadly speaking, though, for students in general, it's media literacy, that we teach that in the School of Communications, and it's something that every student needs to have access to, so that they are developing that life skill to understand how to engage media and what to understand about what is misinformation, what is, being exaggerated in ways that is unfortunate and could be harmful, and understanding that it takes some energy for you to engage media. And I think that's where we've fallen short. And I think that's also what explains so much of the political divide that we see happening in the media field or landscape now, is that I get to be lazy and just look at Twitter. I get to be lazy and just see what's on IG and have someone else tell me what to think and feel about what it means to be liberal, or what it means to be conservative, or what it means to be Black, or what it means to be Latinx. I don't have to do the work of understanding what that is. And so when we're talking about developing skills that are associated with media literacy, that requires folks to do a bit of work. And it requires them to actually be active in terms of receiving the information, interrogating that information, raising questions about where's the source, how did it come to be, making sure that you know that it is not just Kimberly Moffitt sitting in her basement choosing to craft and generate a particular narrative on a story because it will be popular. I've seen this time and time again, especially with young people, especially because we've now commodified the ways in which people can make money off of social media, that now we're starting to create stories. They're far from just overblowing the story. They are full-blown creations that don't exist. And so it requires us to be a lot more engaged in what we're receiving, interrogating. I tell people that when my own children were young, that the reason that I started doing research on Disney films is because I was watching it with them. And in fact, had to stop the TV quite a bit to say, let me tell you why this is problematic. And instead of doing that, I thought, this is something that other parents need to be aware of, that need to be exposed to and be critical of, instead of simply allowing our young people in particular to imbibe and believe it's true, and being able to push back against those narratives.
So with that in mind, then let's explore another aspect, which is what is the responsibility to each other, even on a campus like this. Within the past couple of years, there's been an explosion of protesting because of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And one of the things I always am curious embedded in that, and I've actually spoken to students about this, and I've never been surprised, because just what I expected would happen, and that's people use the phrase "from the river to the sea" very often. And I asked them quite simply, just as a starting question, what river, what sea? Right? Let's just start right there. In other words, I have been very curious since I've been on this campus about the role of protesting and the role of what's our responsibility to educate people about not what they necessarily are protesting about, but all the different catchphrases or different aspects they use almost as taglines.
Yep.
And I'm curious as to how you see maybe the School of Communications and your students playing that type of a role on a college campus, which today tends to be a hotbed, for that type of disagreement, et cetera.
Yep. I actually love that students are that we are that hotbed, because I think this is where we develop engaged citizenry, so that they are very much a part of the future of what the country looks like. So that part needs to happen. The other part that needs to happen is, yes, we've got to do more work in terms of, again, making sure that our students understand. So much of the media is in these short snippets, and so we catch something that sounds snazzy and we run with it without having full context. And it's important, in addition to that principles of speech course that you mentioned, that I actually taught as a TA graduate student here at Howard, it should be a mandatory media literacy course. Because I think as time goes, the media will continue to evolve in ways that make it more and more difficult, especially when we start talking about AI. It will make it more and more difficult for us to understand media, and we've got to teach those tools now. In fact, I would argue those tools need to be taught as soon as a child starts a formal education, so that they can grow up understanding how to engage the media in that way. So,
Dr. Says, Dr. Moffitt brought up AI. I was trying to leave that for as far down as possible. But we're gonna dive right in. Why not, given the experiences, the algorithms, the machine learning, you apply that, the ability to ask the right question, the probing question, the ability to probably provide for people what they need to know, just as much as what they want to know. And the fact that where artificial intelligence is going, because of that ability to curate and to recognize patterns way better than we do, why not use AI substantially in terms of reporting, journalism, investigation, et cetera? I'm curious.
Well, AI is not a person. And what we do as journalists is that we do more than curate. So what we do is that we find the people, we find the facts, we find the new information. So that's something that AI can't do, because it doesn't go out to talk to real people. It might be able to pull background information and background data, but what we do as journalists is that we go out and we get that information, bring it back, write up a story, distill it so that the reader understands what's going on. And what happens is that AI lifts that from us.
That's right.
And so we're always going to be in front of AI, because we're the real people bringing the data to AI. And that's the one thing that, as a journalist, I think that we have a leg up on it because we provide that information that people are scraping from, say, the New York Times or from the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, but they can't get that unless we do our jobs. So I don't think we're going to be obsolete. Our numbers have decreased, but I think that our importance is still, and then the thing to remember about AI is that if it doesn't get fresh information, it degrades. And so in the degrading, you get the hallucinations, and so it makes up facts and information. And so as journalists, that's the other thing we have to do. We have to do our fact checking. And so I think as a journalist, I think we're kind of overwhelmed with AI and what is AI and how AI is going to impact us. But if we focus on what our job is and what our mission is to report the truth and report facts, as well as talk to the people about how they're experiencing these things, I think that we're still going to be the thing that AI is going to have to come to get the correct information.
So I'm going to push a little bit on this because using AI, it can actually probably narrow down where you go look for that person who might have the piece of information to gather it. And in some circumstances, might even decrease the time. I mean, just using my own practical experience as a surgical oncologist for clinical trials, right now, we enroll hundreds of people. We're probably coming into an age where using artificial intelligence and some tools, we'll probably be able to say, listen, instead of getting hundreds of patients, these are the 25 patients we need that will have the diversity of characteristics we need in order to test a particular outcome, and therefore we apply that in an ideal situation to just 25 patients. And you can conduct a trial that would have taken months and years to accumulate that number of people. So I'm going to push on how well and how responsible we can use it, I guess.
You can do that, but still as a journalist, you're talking to people who may not be in a database, right? You're talking to live people and you're talking to people up and down the spectrum. Some of them may not even have access to technology, but you still need their story and you still need to talk to them. So if you're doing maybe an investigative piece and you're looking for teachers across the United States, yes, many of them are going to be in some kind of database and you'll be able to have access to them. But say you're talking about somebody who is impoverished and on the street. I keep going back to homelessness. But that person's not going to be in any database necessarily. And some people may not have access to technology at all. And so as a journalist, those are some of the people. But yes, you can use AI to speed up some of the reporting. If you're doing investigative journalism, you've got databases you can use. You've got technology that you can use to grab information or to learn about things. So I think in many cases, journalists are already doing that, but still the what do they call it, the foot on the ground kind of reporting, something blows up, it's not going to be an AI yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I accept your pushback.
Tool, though. It's a beautiful tool.
Yeah, it's a tool, yeah.
But it's not the end-all, be-all. It's not the panacea that will solve all of these issues of getting information to us. And that, again, goes back to the very beginning comment I made about, when we talk about integrity, that has to do with the humanity of the work that we do. And I think it's necessary in order to accomplish some of what we're doing. I would also say to you that in terms of algorithms, that based on how they operate, at some point in time, you start to see groups missing. Yeah. And from, again, someone that is sitting here at Howard University, that is front and center for me to make sure it doesn't happen. And so I see myself as responsible for creating the next generation of writers and scholars and creators and producers to ensure that that never happens.
Yeah. Got you. So listen, I accept the pushback. My role here is to make sure that I'm as provocative so that we're clear where you stand. I guess switching gears a bit, as I look at the Cathy Hughes School of Communications and its future, what are some of the things that are probably front and center of your mind, Dean, in terms of the things that you would like to see come about within the next 2, 3, 5 years?
Yeah, so we are working on our visioning guide as we speak and cultivating that. It's been very important to me to co-create that with my colleagues. I do have a series of ideas of what I want to do, but it's been really important to make sure that I'm listening to the folks that are here so that I can learn from them. What I can tell you that immediately comes to mind is wanting to see our film program grow. Because again, we see ourselves as being those creators and wanting to make sure our stories are being told. And the only way for that to happen is to ensure that folks who have similar lived experiences are at the helm in which to do so. Another area that has bubbled up that's really been important to the school, and I'm hoping because it's been bubbling for a while that I will be the one that can bring it to fruition, is doing more with sports media. What I will tell you is when you're looking at journalism in particular, there are a few areas that are really still vibrant, growing, and sports is one of them. And I think for, again, an industry that seems to represent so many of us as players in those sports, that we should also be on the other side to be able to tell the stories of what's happening in those spaces. And so sports media as an initiative is another key area that we're working on. What I'm hearing from students is they want to hear more from our alumni. And so we're also developing a year-long speaker series to make sure that they are hearing what were those ways in which you achieved where you are and how you got there, and making sure that they are hearing those stories and also having opportunities to tap into potential internships and even jobs post-graduation. So I see us as still this very vibrant area on this campus, but in society broadly, because there's so much that happens because of communications. There's so much that happens because of miscommunication. And so as a result of that, it's necessary for us to be at the helm to help tell those stories.
Good. And so, Dr. Stills, I'm going to give you the last question. You lived in a few buildings.
Oh, yes.
That represented the School of Communications, and our goal is to bring forth a permanent home for the School of Communications. So with that in mind, what would you like to see in such a building?
Well, I'd like to see a building that can house all of our departments and our sequences. Right now, we are, especially for film and TV, right now this is a wonderful studio that we finally have the space where we can create. For journalism, we need some kind of similar space as well. And for our communication sciences and disorder, they need a clinic. I think when I started here, the clinic made money, and they were able to funnel that back into the program. And since we've been disrupted and we're building our clientele again, I think that's something that we can really look into, because the people really come because the services are really great, right. And a lot of the community come to the clinic to get those services. And I think we're limiting the way that they can take part in those services because we don't have the facilities, we don't have the parking. So I think the building that we get really has to be, I would love it to be as big as the CB Power building where we used to reside, because that had space for everything and everybody. But I understand that we may need a smaller footprint, but I think that if we can have the resources to repurpose rooms for different courses and different classes and different instruction, I think we'll be good.
Yeah, well, certainly, you know, as we even talk about an academic medical center, this is why I think it's critical that the CATU School of Communications is represented in that discussion as well, as you rightly pointed out. Well, as we close this conversation, I want to thank my guests for joining me as we discussed how HBCUs like Howard have a responsibility to train journalists who can critically evaluate information, avoid harmful framing, and report solutions with integrity and accountability. I'm Dr. Wayne Frederick. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Journey.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at WHUT.org. Thank you.